The celestial horizon hummed with quiet tension. Its massive research vessel cut through the dark space like a silver knife, carrying a crew of curious scientists from dozens of alien worlds. Captain Jae-Yun Park stood at the main observation deck, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the massive holographic display that showed the approaching planet. Earth, a world that had been whispered about in scientific circles for decades, a planet classified as a Deathworld, a place so harsh and dangerous that most civilized species would never survive its brutal conditions. The preliminary data had been shocking enough to make even the most seasoned researchers pause. "Activate full spectrum analysis," Jae-Hyun commanded, his voice calm, but with an underlying current of excitement. Yoonji, the ship's lead xenobiologist, worked her control panel with practiced movements. Her fingers danced across holographic interfaces, pulling up layers of planetary data. Green and blue screens flickered to life, showing everything from atmospheric composition to surface temperature variations. "Scanning now, Captain," she reported. Minjin, the team's senior data analyst, leaned forward. His eyes were wide, reflecting the complex data streams washing over the screens. Something was different about this planet. Very different. The first set of scans began to appear. Temperature readings showed extreme variations, from scorching hot regions to freezing cold zones. Atmospheric composition suggested high levels of oxygen, multiple complex gases, and radiation levels that would kill most known species within minutes. But that wasn't the strangest part. The surface imagery started to resolve. Instead of a barren, hostile landscape, the planet showed complex ecosystems teeming with life. Large predatory creatures moved across varied terrains, forests, grasslands, mountain ranges, but they weren't doing what any rational being would expect. They weren't hunting. They weren't fighting. "Are you seeing this?" Minjin whispered, his professional composure cracking slightly. What should have been apex predators, creatures that would instantly destroy any other living thing, were moving in coordinated patterns. A pack of wolf-like animals walked alongside smaller creatures. In another section, massive bear-like beings seemed to be protecting something. Yunji zoomed in. Humans. Bipedal creatures were walking freely among these potential killing machines. Not running, not hiding, walking. "Enhance image section Delta 7, Captain Park ordered. The holographic display zoomed in. Now they could see details. A human, a small, apparently fragile creature, was walking through a forest area. Nearby, what looked like a massive predator with teeth the size of daggers moved alongside this human. Not attacking, not threatening, moving together. "This is impossible," Yunji muttered. The ship's computer began cross-referencing the data with known planetary classifications. Deathworld criteria scrolled down. Extreme temperatures, high radiation, complex predator ecosystems, unpredictable environmental conditions. Yet the humans seemed comfortable. More than comfortable. They seemed to be in control. Minjin's analysis program started generating probability models. Each simulation showed the same impossible result. These humans shouldn't exist. By all scientific understanding, they should have been wiped out generations ago. "Captain," Minjin said, his voice a mixture of confusion and wonder, "our models show a 99.997% probability that this species should have gone extinct within the first few generations of their planetary development." Jae-Hyun Park said nothing. He kept watching the holographic display, where a human was now riding what looked like a massive predatory creature, as casually as one might ride a domesticated animal. Something fundamental was happening on this planet, something that challenged everything they knew about survival, evolution, and interspecies interaction. The celestial horizon continued its approach, carrying a crew of aliens who were about to discover that everything they understood about life, predation, and survival was about to be rewritten. Earth was waiting. The research team worked through the night, their excitement building with each new piece of information about Earth. Minjin's fingers flew across the holographic display, pulling up detailed scans and cross-referencing every piece of data. "Look at this," he called out to Yunji, pointing at a series of images. The screens showed landscapes that defied all scientific understanding. In one scene, a massive predator that looked like a cross between a bear and a mountain lion walked calmly beside a human child. The child wasn't running, wasn't scared. The predator moved with a gentleness that seemed impossible. Yunji zoomed in on another section. A group of humans were working in what appeared to be a forest. Nearby, multiple predatory creatures moved around them. Not hunting, not threatening, working. "This isn't just taming," Yunji muttered. "This is something else entirely." Captain Jae-hyun Park listened carefully as Minjin began to explain his initial findings. The holographic display filled with charts, graphs, and complex data streams that painted an impossible picture. "According to our preliminary analysis," Minjin began, "these humans have developed a method of interspecies communication that goes beyond anything we've ever seen. Look at these neural pattern readings." The display showed intricate brain wave patterns, not just for the humans, but for the predatory animals around them. The patterns were synchronized in a way that suggested something more than simple training or control. "It's like they're talking," Yunji interrupted. "But not with words, with something deeper." More images appeared, a human shepherd guiding a pack of wolf-like creatures, a research team working in a jungle, surrounded by predators that seemed more like bodyguards than wild animals. In one particularly striking image, a massive creature that looked like it could crush a small vehicle was gently nudging the human child away from a dangerous cliff edge. "Their survival rates are impossible," Minjin continued. "On any other planet, these humans would have been wiped out generations ago. This planet should be a death trap. Instead, they've turned it into something else." Captain Park approached the display, his eyes narrowing. "What are we missing?" he asked quietly. Yunji pulled up another set of data. Ecological surveys showed something even more remarkable. The predatory creatures weren't just coexisting with humans. They were actively maintaining the ecosystem, controlling prey populations, protecting plant life, working in a system so complex that it seemed almost like a single massive organism. "It's not just survival," Yunji said. "It's cooperation on a level we've never seen before." The ship's computer continued to process information. Each new scan revealed more questions than answers. How had these humans done this? What technology, or perhaps something beyond technology, allowed them to transform a Deathworld into a carefully balanced ecosystem? Minjin pulled up a comparison chart. On one side, the expected survival rates for a species on a planet like Earth. On the other, the actual survival and thriving population of humans. The difference was so stark, it almost looked like a mistake. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. More images appeared. Humans working with predators to fight forest fires, protecting endangered species, managing complex ecological systems with a level of understanding that seemed to go beyond simple science. "They're not just surviving," Captain Park said slowly. "They're managing the entire planet." The research team fell silent. Each of them understood the magnitude of what they were seeing. This wasn't just a new species. This was something entirely different. As the celestial horizon continued its observation, the mystery of Earth grew deeper. The humans and their incredible relationship with the planet's most dangerous creatures remained an enigma waiting to be understood. And they were just beginning to scratch the surface. The landing shuttle descended slowly, its protective shields humming with energy. Inside, Captain Jae-hyun Park checked his equipment one last time. This would be the first direct contact with the surface of Earth, and everyone was on edge. Yunji sat near the shuttle's main viewport, her hands trembling slightly. Minjin reviewed the landing protocols, his eyes darting between multiple holographic displays. "Final approach," the shuttle's computer announced in a calm voice. The landscape came into view. Thick forests stretched out below them, mixed with open grasslands and rocky terrain. Nothing like the standard Deathworld images they'd seen in textbooks. This looked alive, vibrant, welcoming. The shuttle touched down in a clearing. For several minutes, nobody moved. Atmospheric readings, Captain Park asked. Minjin checked the screens. Breathable, he reported. Oxygen levels high. Radiation within acceptable limits. Temperature stable. It shouldn't have been possible. Everything they knew about Deathworld suggested this planet should be hostile, deadly. Instead, it felt almost peaceful. The outer doors of the shuttle began to open. Captain Park went first, as protocol demanded. He stepped out, wearing a lightweight protective suit that was more of a precaution than a necessity. The air felt crisp, clean. Sounds of life surrounded them. Bird calls, rustling leaves, distant animal noises. Then they saw him. A human stood about 50 meters away. Not running, not hiding. Just standing there, watching them. Next to the human was a creature that made the entire research team freeze. It looked like a combination of a wolf and something much larger, easily twice the size of the human, with fur that seemed to shimmer between different colors. Massive teeth, powerful muscles that could tear apart most known species in seconds. And it was sitting, calmly, next to the human. "Don't move," Yoonji whispered to her teammates. The human raised a hand, not in a threatening gesture, more like a wave. Then he spoke. The translation software in their communication devices struggled for a moment before resolving the words. "Welcome to Earth," the human said. "I'm David." The wolf-like creature next to him didn't growl, didn't show any signs of aggression. It simply looked at the alien research team with what could only be described as curiosity. Minjin's recording devices captured everything. Heart rates, atmospheric conditions, the precise positioning of every living thing in the area. David took a step forward. The massive predator moved with him, matching his pace exactly. "I know you have questions," David said. His voice was calm, friendly, as if meeting alien researchers was something he did every day. Captain Park found his voice. "How?" he asked. Just that. One word that carried the weight of everything they'd been wondering. David smiled. The predator beside him seemed to smile too. Though that was impossible. Predators didn't smile. "We learned," David said simply. "We listened. We understood." More creatures began to appear at the edge of the forest. Not attacking. Just watching. Massive predators that could destroy entire cities stood like curious children, observing the alien visitors. The research team from the celestial horizon realized something fundamental in that moment. Everything they knew about survival, about predation, about the relationship between different species. It was all about to change. Earth was nothing like they had expected. And this was just the beginning. The research facility they had set up was unlike any temporary station in galactic history. Instead of being the secure, isolated space, it was open, welcoming. David had insisted on it. Isolation creates fear, he had explained to Captain Jae-yun Park. And fear is the enemy of understanding. Yoonji watched carefully as David demonstrated something extraordinary. A massive predator, what humans called a grizzly bear, sat beside him like a well-trained dog. But this was something more than training, more than friendship. "Communication isn't just about sound," David said. He touched a small device on his wrist. The bear's ears twitched, its eyes focused. Minjin's recording equipment went crazy. Neural patterns, chemical signals. Something was happening that their most advanced technology could barely understand. The bear stood up, walked to a nearby tree, began to carefully clear away some dead branches, not because it was trained, but because it seemed to understand something larger. "We don't control them," David explained. "We communicate with them." Yoonji couldn't help but ask the question burning in her mind. "How?" David smiled. It was a smile that seemed to hold centuries of knowledge. "We learned to listen," he said. "Not just with ears, with everything." More demonstrations followed. A wolf pack working to clear a forest path. Massive predators helping to manage animal populations, protecting smaller creatures, creating balance. The research team saw something impossible. These weren't domesticated animals. They were partners. Captain Park reviewed the data. Every scan showed the same impossible truth. The predators weren't just working with humans. They were part of a larger system, a living, breathing ecosystem where every creature had a role. It's like they're one organism, Minjin muttered, looking at his screens. David nodded. Exactly, he said. We're not separate. We're connected. More humans arrived. They worked alongside the predators, guiding, communicating, not controlling, participating. In one area, a group of predators helped clear a river of debris. In another, they protected smaller animals from natural dangers. They weren't mindless killing machines. They were caretakers. Yunji's xenolinguistic analysis revealed something even more shocking. The communication wasn't just physical. It wasn't just about sounds or gestures. There was something deeper. A language of chemical signals, of neural patterns, of something that went beyond words. We almost destroyed ourselves, David explained during one of their long conversations. We thought we were separate from nature, above it. Then we learned our mistake. The research team from the celestial horizon began to understand. This wasn't just about survival. This was about cooperation, about understanding. Minjin's computer tried to map the complex interactions, tried to create a model that could explain what was happening. But every model broke. Every attempt to simplify fell apart. Nature on Earth wasn't a competition. It was a conversation. As the day turned to night, the predators moved with purpose. Protecting, managing, working. The humans moved among them, not as masters, not as owners, but as part of something larger. Captain Park looked at his team. They had come expecting a hostile world, a planet of death and destruction. Instead, they had found something else entirely. A world where everything was connected, where survival wasn't about fighting. It was about understanding. Earth was teaching them something fundamental about life itself, and they were just beginning to learn. The research lab buzzed with energy. Screens filled with complex data showed something that made no sense to the alien scientists. Minjin stood in the center, his hands moving through holographic displays, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. This is impossible, he muttered. Captain J.M. Park leaned closer. The screens showed detailed maps of neural connections between humans and the planet's predatory creatures. But these weren't simple connections. They were complex networks that looked more like living computer systems than biological interactions. Yunji pointed to a specific scan. Look at this, she said. The image showed a chemical exchange between a human and a large predator. But it wasn't just an exchange. It was a conversation. A complex communication that went beyond anything they had ever seen. David entered the lab. The researchers had learned that he was more than just a guide. He was a scientist, a bridge between human understanding and something much deeper. We discovered this by accident, David explained. He touched a screen, bringing up more detailed information. About 200 years ago, we realized we were doing everything wrong. The screen showed historical data, centuries of human conflict, destruction of ecosystems, killing of predators. Then, suddenly, a change. We stopped seeing nature as something to control, David said. We started seeing it as something to understand. Minjin's computer tried to map the technological breakthrough. It showed layers of communication that went beyond simple technology, something that mixed biology, technology, and something else entirely. We developed neural link technologies, David continued, but not like you might think. Not machines controlling living things, but ways of understanding, of listening. The screen showed complex diagrams, chemical signals, neural patterns, something that looked like a living computer system, but wasn't a computer at all. Captain Park asked the question they all wanted to know. How? David smiled. We learned to be humble, he said. We realized we were part of something bigger, not masters, not controllers, partners. More images appeared, predators working with humans to manage forests, to protect smaller animals, to maintain a complex ecosystem that seemed to breathe like a single organism. Yunji's analysis showed something even more shocking. The communication wasn't just between humans and predators. It was between all living things on the planet, a massive interconnected network that worked together. Our early attempts were terrible, David explained. We tried to control, to manage, to force nature into what we thought was right. We failed every time. The screen showed generations of human attempts, failures, destruction. Then, slowly, a change. We started to listen, David said. Really listen. The technological breakthrough wasn't about control. It was about communication, about understanding that every living thing had a role, a purpose. Minjin's computer struggled to create a model that could explain what was happening. Every attempt fell apart. This wasn't a simple system. It was something alive, something that changed and adapted constantly. We didn't tame nature, David said. We became part of it. The research team from the celestial horizon began to understand something fundamental. This wasn't just a technological achievement. This was a complete change in how a species understood its place in the universe. Captain Park looked at his team. They had come expecting to find a primitive world. Instead, they had discovered something much more complex. A living system, a planet that worked like a single, massive organism, where every creature, every plant, every living thing had a role. Earth was teaching them something fundamental about life itself, and they were just beginning to understand. The meeting room was silent. Representatives from the Galactic Council watched the recorded data from Earth. Their faces showed something between confusion and total disbelief. Minjin stood at the front of the room, his hands moving carefully through holographic displays. Each image challenged everything they knew about planetary management and survival. Every known civilization has one basic rule, he explained. Predators are threats. They must be controlled, eliminated. Another image appeared, a human child walking through a forest. Massive predators moving around the child like protective guardians. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Yunji stepped forward. Humans didn't just survive their death world, she said. They transformed it. More images followed. Predators helping to manage forests, protecting smaller animals, working with humans like team members. Not servants, not slaves, partners. One of the council members, an elder from a highly advanced technological civilization, spoke. This is impossible, he said. His voice was a mix of anger and fear. David, who had been invited to explain, simply smiled. We learned something important, he said. Nature isn't a war, it's a conversation. The images continued. Wolves helping to control deer populations, bears protecting forest ecosystems, massive predators working to maintain balance in ways no technology could manage. Captain Jaehyun Park watched carefully. He knew what was happening. The council was experiencing a cultural shock that would change everything they understood about life. They'd broken every rule of planetary survival, one council member muttered. Another image showed a human research team. Predators worked alongside them, not as trained animals, as partners, as part of a larger system. We didn't conquer our planet, David explained. We learned to listen to it. The council's computer systems tried to analyze the data, but every model broke. Every attempt to understand failed. This wasn't a simple system of control. This was something alive, something that changed and grew. Minjin's research showed something even more shocking. The humans hadn't just survived on their death world. They had created a system more complex and efficient than any managed ecosystem in galactic history. Look at their forest management, Yunji pointed out. The screen showed forests that were healthy, growing, alive in ways that seemed impossible. The predators weren't destroying. They were protecting, managing, working as part of a larger system. This challenges everything, the Elder Council member said again. But this time, his voice had changed. There was wonder now, not just fear. David continued to explain how humans had learned from their mistakes, how they had stopped trying to control nature and started trying to understand it. More images appeared, predators helping to fight forest fires, protecting smaller animals, managing ecosystems in ways no technology could match. The council members leaned forward. Their previous certainty was crumbling. Everything they knew about survival was being rewritten. "We thought survival was about strength," David said. "We learned it's about understanding." Captain Park watched his team. They had come to study a Deathworld. Instead, they had discovered something much more important, a new way of looking at life itself. The meeting continued. The Galactic Council was about to learn something fundamental. That survival isn't about fighting. It's about listening, about understanding. Earth had a lesson to teach, and the universe was finally ready to listen. The testing ground was a large open area surrounded by thick forests. Alien researchers from the celestial horizon watched carefully. Their recording devices were ready. Their minds were not. David stood in the center of the clearing. Around him, several massive predators waited, not like trained animals, more like team members waiting for instructions. "Communication is more than words," David said. His voice was calm, clear. Captain Jaehyun Park leaned forward. Minjin's recording equipment captured every tiny detail. Yunji held her breath. A wolf-like creature, easily 3 times the size of a human, moved closer to David. Its movements were smooth, careful, not threatening, not scared, just present. David raised his hand. No device, no visible technology, just a simple gesture. The predators around him shifted, not randomly, not by chance, with purpose. "Watch carefully," David said. The first demonstration began. A series of targets appeared in the testing ground. Some were moving. Some were stationary. Some were hidden. The kind of targets that would challenge the most advanced hunting systems in the galaxy. The predators moved, but they didn't move like hunters. They moved like a team, like they were solving a complex puzzle. Each creature knew exactly what to do, where to go, how to work with the others. One predator would draw attention. Another would circle around. A third would carefully manage the approach. No communication devices were visible. No obvious signals were given. Minjin's computer tried to track the communication. Failed. The targets disappeared. Neutralized. Not destroyed. Managed. How? Captain Park asked. The question hung in the air. David smiled. "We don't control," he explained. "We understand." Another demonstration followed. A simulation of a forest fire rescue. The predators worked together, moving smaller animals to safety, creating fire breaks, protecting the ecosystem. No human gave direct commands. No technology seemed to be controlling them. Yunji's analysis showed something impossible. The predators were communicating, not just with each other, but with the environment itself. Chemical signals, neural patterns, something that looked like a living computer system. But it wasn't a computer, it was alive. More scenarios followed. Environmental management, ecosystem protection, complex problem solving that would challenge the most advanced robotic systems in the galaxy. The alien researchers watched in total silence. "We are not masters," David said. "We are partners." The predators moved like a single organism. Each knew its role, its purpose, without visible commands, without clear control systems. Minjin's recording devices went crazy. Neural patterns that shouldn't be possible. Communication methods that defied all known scientific understanding. Captain Park realized something fundamental. This wasn't about technology. This was about something deeper. A way of understanding that went beyond simple control. The demonstration continued. The predators solved complex environmental challenges, managed ecological systems, worked together in ways that seemed impossible. No weapons were used. No force was applied. Just understanding. Just communication. "We learned to listen," David repeated, "not just with ears, with everything." As the demonstration ended, the predators returned to David's side. Not like trained animals, like team members, like partners. The alien researchers from the celestial horizon understood something important. Everything they knew about survival, about communication, about the relationship between different species, it was all about to change. Earth had a lesson to teach, and the universe was finally ready to listen. The Galactic Council chamber was unlike any meeting room in history. Representatives from thousands of different worlds sat in stunned silence. The holographic displays showed everything they had learned about Earth, and everything they now realized they didn't understand. Minjin stood at the center of the chamber. His hands moved through complex data projections. Each image challenged everything the Council knew about planetary survival, species interaction, and ecosystem management. "Humans didn't just survive," he explained. His voice was calm, clear. They reimagined survival itself. The displays showed centuries of human development, early mistakes, destruction of ecosystems, then a sudden dramatic change. Captain Jae-hyun Park watched carefully. He knew what was happening. The entire galaxy was about to have its understanding completely rewritten. Yoonji stepped forward. More images appeared, predators working with humans, not as servants, not as slaves, as partners. "Every known civilization has one basic rule," she said. "Predators are threats. They must be controlled, eliminated." The council members shifted uncomfortably. More images followed. Wolves managing deer populations, bears protecting forest ecosystems, massive predators working in ways no technology could manage. "They've broken every rule of planetary management," one elder council member muttered. David, who had been invited to explain, stood quietly. He didn't need to say anything. The images spoke for themselves. The data showed something impossible. Humans had transformed a Deathworld into the most efficiently managed ecosystem in galactic history, not through technology, not through force, through understanding. Minjin's research revealed layers of complexity that made no sense. Chemical communications, neural networks that worked like living computer systems. But these weren't machines. They were alive. "Look at their forest management," Yoonji pointed out. The screens showed forests that were healthy, growing, alive in ways that seemed impossible. The predators weren't destroying. They were protecting, managing, working as part of a larger system. One by one, the council members began to understand. This wasn't just about one planet. This was about a completely new way of thinking about life itself. "We thought survival was about strength," David said quietly. "We learned it's about understanding." The images continued, predators helping to fight environmental challenges, protecting smaller animals, managing ecosystems in ways no technology could match. Captain Park watched his team. They had come to study a Deathworld. Instead, they had discovered something much more important. A new way of looking at life. The holographic displays showed more. Humans working with predators to clean rivers, to manage animal populations, to protect entire ecosystems, not through force, through communication. The Council's computer systems tried to analyze the data, but every model broke. Every attempt to understand failed. This wasn't a simple system of control. This was something alive, something that changed and grew. They didn't conquer their planet, one researcher said. They became part of it. More data appeared, showing how humans had learned from their mistakes, how they had stopped trying to control nature and started trying to understand it. The implications were massive. Every known civilization had approached planetary management the same way. Control, eliminate threats, manage resources. Humans had done something completely different. They had listened. As the meeting continued, the Galactic Council realized something fundamental. Everything they knew about survival was being rewritten. Earth had a lesson to teach. About cooperation. About understanding. About working with nature instead of against it. And the universe was finally ready to listen. The celestial horizon hung in orbit around Earth. Inside the ship, everything had changed. The research team that had come to study at Deathworld now understood something much bigger. Captain Jae-yun Park sat in the observation room. Screens showed the planet below. A living, breathing system that challenged everything they knew about life. Minjin entered the room. His eyes were different. No longer just a researcher. Now someone who had seen something fundamental about the universe. "We were wrong," he said simply. Yunji followed him. She carried data tablets filled with information that would rewrite scientific understanding across thousands of worlds. "Not just a little wrong," she added. "Completely wrong." The screen showed Earth, not as a hostile planet, but as a complex, living system where every creature played a role, where survival wasn't about fighting. It was about understanding. David had explained it simply. "We are not separate from nature," he had told them. "We are part of it." Captain Park remembered the demonstrations, predators working with humans, not as trained animals, as partners, as part of something much larger. More images appeared. Forests managed by a complex system of communication. Predators protecting ecosystems. Smaller animals living in a careful balance that no technology could manage. "They didn't control their planet," Minjin said. "They became part of it." The research team had come expecting to find a primitive world. Instead, they had discovered a living system more complex than any technological civilization in the galaxy. Yunji's research showed something even more shocking. The humans' method of communication went beyond simple signals. It was a living network, a way of understanding that connected everything. The screen showed more. Predators helping to manage environmental challenges. Protecting smaller animals. Working together in ways that seemed impossible. "Every known civilization tries to control," Captain Park said quietly. Humans learned to listen. More data appeared, showing how humans had transformed their understanding over centuries. Learning from their mistakes. Understanding that survival wasn't about strength, it was about cooperation. Minjin's computer continued to process the information. But no model could fully explain what they had discovered. This was something alive. Something that changed and grew. The Galactic Council was still trying to understand. Their entire approach to planetary management was being challenged. David's words echoed in the observation room. "We are not masters," he had said. "We are partners." The screen showed Earth, a planet that breathed, that lived, where every creature had a purpose, where survival wasn't a competition, it was a conversation. Yunji looked at the data. "We thought technology was the answer," she said. "Humans learned that understanding is more powerful." More images appeared. Wolves managing deer populations, bears protecting forest ecosystems, predators working in ways no technology could match. Captain Park understood something fundamental. This wasn't just about one planet. This was about a completely new way of thinking about life itself. The celestial horizon continued its orbit. The research team knew they were carrying something important. Not just data, not just information, a new way of understanding. Outside, Earth continued its complex dance of life. Predators and humans and smaller animals working together. Not through force, through communication, through understanding. "We have a lot to learn," Minjin said. The screen showed the planet below. Alive, growing, changing. A living system that had something to teach the entire galaxy. And the universe was finally ready to listen. Asterisk transmission end asterisk.